the event and took all of the academic libraries, public libraries, school libraries, and bookshops in Sydney and ACT and around New South Wales who have helped me advertise this event. I think we can agree that a lot of you have come a long way to get here, but the person who has come the longest is the bookshop. So ladies and gentlemen, let's get started.
Okay, so I was a college student, and I was going to be, I intended to write novels, and I was going to be a serious novelist, and I was going to write swords and horses fantasy and epic fantasy, and that's what I was going to do. And I set forth to do that, and I wrote my first novel. It was awful. I wouldn't have made Osama bin Laden read that novel. That novel, I really wouldn't have used it. It was that terrible. And so I wrote a novel after that, and it was awful. And I followed that up with a third novel in that series. I tried a fourth novel that was kind of more of an X-Files-y thing, and that was really, really bad. And then I did a fifth novel, which was a rewrite of the first novel, but it didn't help. Rewriting it really didn't make it all that much better. So I spun off into a new fantasy series for novels 6 and 7, and I still was not getting anywhere with any of it. And at that point, my writing teacher, Deborah Chester, had been trying to give me advice the whole time, which I had not taken because I had a degree in English literature and I knew what I was doing. Whereas she had merely published 40 novels. So one semester I decided, you know what? I'm going to prove to Debbie how wrong she is about everything. I'm going to be her good little writing monkey, and I'm going to fill out all her little sheets and do all her little forms and outlines and plan out everything ahead of time and use all these stupid little devices, and she is going to see exactly what horrible cookie-cutter pablum crap comes out of a process like that. And I wrote the first book of the Dresden Files, which showed her. So that was it was a good age of my life to start realizing that maybe I didn't know everything. I think I was about 25 at the time. That is also when you start thinking, as a young man, you start thinking to yourself something along the lines of, there might be something to life other than boobs. And it's also, that's why, I don't know how they have it set up in Australia, but in America, that's when the car insurance rates go down at that same age. I don't think that's a coincidence at all. But anyway, so it was at that point that I started learning how much I didn't know. And then I actually started learning to write. The Dresden Files, I wrote the next 3 books I wrote were the first 3 books of the Dresden Files, and the one after that was the first book of the Codex Alera. All those sold at that point. But I remember taking that first chapter of Stormfront into Let Her Read, and she picked it up and looked at it and started and read over the first chapter and looked up and said, "Well, you did it." And I said, "What?" Because I was used to very no-holds-barred, harsh criticism. And she said, "You did it. This will sell. I don't know if this will be the first thing you sell, but this will sell." And I was like, "Okay." And it was like the first positive responses I'd gotten from her ever. And it turned out she was right to boot. You know, about the whole thing. And then 3 months later, I was kicked out of the School of Professional Writing at the University of Oklahoma, evidently for not having what it took to be a professional writer. Also, the dean, who was actually teaching me one of the classes, had asked me to come to an alumni dinner and talk about the professional writing program. And I said, "Well, what do I say?" He said, "Well, just speak your mind about it." And apparently, you're supposed to know better when the dean tells you that. Your mind is supposed to be in a certain place where you should go. And yeah, I don't get along in those kind of structured organizations real well. I don't know why that is, but anyway, so that was how I stumbled into writing. I've been when I started writing the Codex Alera, I wrote those on a bet. I was on an online list. This was before I got published, and I was on the Del Rey Online Writers Workshop, which was a big discussion group where people who wanted to be writers could go on the internet and yell at each other instead of actually getting writing accomplished. And there was a giant discussion going on the list about whether the great idea was the absolute core, indispensable part of writing was the most important thing, or whether the writer's presentation was the most important thing. And for me, it was all about presentation. It's all about the writer. If the writer can put his own fresh spin on a story, he can take an old story that you've heard 1,000 times and still make a good story out of it that you'll enjoy. How many versions of Romeo and Juliet have you seen? That was my point. And then the other side was, if you've got a great idea, it doesn't matter how lame a writer you are, the great idea will sell the story. Look at Jurassic Park. That was their words, not mine. But this discussion was going back and forth and back and forth. It was one of those discussions that, pretty much you just hit the caps lock key and reply and start typing. That's how it goes. And finally, this guy on the other side said, and bear in mind, we were all just loudmouths on the internet. I'm still just a loudmouth on the internet, but now I've got some books published. This guy says, why don't you put your money where your mouth is? Let me give you a lame idea and see you write a good story out of it. And being the punk that I was, I said, no, why don't you give me 2 lame ideas and I'll use them both. And so the guy did. He said, okay, first lame idea is Lost Roman Legion. I am so sick of Lost Roman Legion stories. All the Lost Roman Legion should have been found by now. Lost Roman Legion #1. I'm like, okay, good. And I'm like, what's #2? And he says, Pokemon. I am so sick of the Pokemon. I'm like, okay, fine. And I took it. And I said, Lost Roman Legion. And I went and I researched Lost Roman Legions, which I knew very little about. And I discovered that the Lost Roman Legion that everybody's talking about is the 9th Hibernian Legion who marched off into what was supposedly friendly territory, into a storm, and never came back again. And that was the end of their legion. So I thought, okay, well, let's take this legion, and where are they going to march to? And maybe they marched to somewhere and came out somewhere. And that's where they are. So where'd they go to? Land of the Pokemon. All right, great. So I went and started looking at Lost Roman Legions, and I figured out, okay, Lost Roman Legions, the Roman Legion was actually only about half Roman citizens, and the other half was German mercenaries. And then they had about this many camp followers that were along with them, because even though you weren't allowed to get married in the Roman army, everybody did anyway. Only it just wasn't official, and you had your camp followers along. Right? So I figured out, okay, this is actually a pretty good colonization force, a pretty good sized colonization force. So they went off to this land. And I went and looked at Pokemon, which is itself a fusion of 2 ideas. Which is, first is the Shinto religion, which holds that there's a divine spirit inside of all natural things, a divine spirit, a kami inside of all natural things. And then the giant mountain has a huge kami in it, and a pebble has a tiny kami in it, and you'd better respect the pebble. But if you don't, what's it going to do? It's a pebble. And then the second idea that Pokemon is made from is professional wrestling. So they took Shinto and professional wrestling together. So I decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to set up this world where these kami actually exist, where people belong to them, and I stuck my Roman Legion there, and I gave them 10,000 years to ferment, and I said, okay, or 2,000 years to ferment, and I said, okay, now we'll start the story here, and that's where we got started. So, if anybody wonders, Alera is set in about 2004 is in the first book, so, parallel. But anyway, so this whole time I put this whole thing together, and I got the first few chapters written, and I'm like, this is actually kind of a cool story. I think I'm going to work with this. And I got back online, I said, actually, and the guy's like, well, where's this awesome story? I'm like, well, I don't want to publish it here, because I think I can sell it. So I'm not going to put it up here. He's like, oh, so I'm right. And I had to be like, yeah, you're right. And then I sold 6 books. And to this day, I don't remember the guy. And who knows, he may be in an audience aiming some sort of assassin gun disguised as a sandwich at me one day. Who knows what's going to happen. So basically, I have stumbled into a career in professional writing on accident, and looked around bewildered at my good fortune. And mostly that is due to you guys who put my kid through college. She fears. So basically, I'm a goober who happens to be standing at this spot and has lucked out a bit and has worked awfully hard a bit. But that's what I do. I make up stuff that I think will be fun. I write down the conversations of my imaginary friends, and I've somehow managed to con you guys to pay me to do it. Thank you so much. So let's just do like questions and answers at this point. I think is that cool? Okay, but it only works if one of you asks a question. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so when it comes to the Dresden files, have you ever, because you've been writing for quite a few years, have you ever looked back on some of your earlier works and gone, I wish I made a different choice at that point.
Oh, yes and no. Because as soon as I can start playing with parallel universes, I'm going to get to show some of the things. I'm actually, one of the books that's going to be upcoming is I'm just going to go for total originality and call it Mirror Mirror. And stick Harry in a parallel universe where he made one choice differently when he was much younger, and show the fallout from that choice in that universe as he's going. And that's going to be an extremely fun story. I don't get to write it next. I think it's the story after this next one, which is after Skin Game. So there's Skin Game, and then the next one, the White Council is going to come to town, and there's going to be a big brouhaha, and then I think we're going to do Mirror Mirror after that, and then maybe professional wrestling stories. Because I love professional wrestling. I watch it for the writing. And you can sort of pick out, well, wait, what's the inspiration for this show? And you can figure out what book is the inspiration for this show. In this particular segment of the wrestling, it's like, aha, this is the Return of the King episode. Look, they've destroyed the evil guy, and now the good king is back, and and now he's the champion of the league, and so has been fired, and so has been rehired, and he stretched forth his hand and cured a girl of cancer. And you know, it's wonderful. I love watching wrestling. It's great fiction. But you know, that's sort of the future. As far as wondering about changing things in the past, nah, I'm pretty happy with it. I kind of got to use that Edna Mode quote. I never live in the past, darling. It detracts from the now.
So
yeah.
Just how you read your short stories finally at the end. Will we either see a story about young Michael, or Michael come back as a cyborg Michael?
Cyborg Michael?
No, seriously, he is perhaps one of the...
Cyborg Michael? Really? Did I just hear that? Cyborg Paladin. God, I love that idea.
To see some more content with him. Like, he outfights an army guy winning.
Just read Skin Game, you'll be happy. So, yeah.
What made you decide to do a Spider-Man?
Oh, are you kidding? What made me decide to do a Spider-Man novel? They said, Jim, do you want to do a Spider-Man novel? Yes, I want to do a Spider-Man novel. Give me that pen so I can sign a contract. Are you going to pay me anything? As it turns out, no, they're really not. No. I made even when the books weren't selling as well then as they are now. But even then, I took about 90% pay cut to write that Spider-Man novel. But I got to write Spider-Man. I got to have the Rhino drink tea on Aunt May's couch, and you know, that was too good a time to pass up. I just couldn't possibly pass that one up. Of course, it threw off my writing schedule to the point that it's still behind because I threw that extra book in. But that's okay. I'll deal with it. Yeah. Why polka on Butters? Because my main writing. Okay, every time I make basically a new mixtape every time I start writing a new Dresden book, and the mixtape for Deadbeat was or the mixtape for the book that had Butters originally in it, which I believe was it was the fifth one, Death Masks. That one had a load of polka, Weird Al's polka music on it. And so why not? I'll have him like polka. I can do that. So in my head, you know, basically Butters is being played by about 1984 age or about 1990 age Weird Al. In my head, that's who plays it. Yeah.
Do you see actors for all the characters?
Not always. Sometimes it changes as time goes on. Right now, I think if I could cast anybody I wanted, I would get Michael Fassbender to play Dresden, and I go get Hiddleston to play Thomas. He's awfully popular with the ladies these days.
Who's playing Molly?
What's that?
Who's playing Molly?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't got that far really. But you know, whoever, if she's, you know, provided she's cute and can pull off sass, that's what I really need. I'm trying to think of the actress who sort of stuck in my head, but now she's bounced out of it again.
You need a tall Molly though, that's the thing.
What's that?
You need a tall Molly, remember? Because she's like similar in build to her mum, so...
Yeah. She's, I know who I casted Charity. I want Lucy Lawless to play Charity. She'd be damn perfect for that. But other than that, I actually got to meet Lucy this week. She walked through the door, she was at Supanova, and she walked through the door, and I'm like, I should go talk to her. No, I couldn't do that. I'm standing in the elevator next to Lucy Law. Oh my gosh, it's Xena. Yeah, because I'm such a huge nerd. Yeah.
You brought a lot of experience, at least in Dresden files, about gamers and gaming, and there's of course the role-playing games. Have you played many games, and if so, what is your favorite, and what is your favorite gaming experience?
Okay. How to answer this one. I rolled up my first D&D character when I was 7 years old on the first day of first grade when I should have been listening to my spelling teacher, and I was instead rolling up my first D&D character who was a basic D&D character from that old red, blue, yellow primary colors D&D set. It was an elf named Spock. That's how nerdy I am, sir. As far as favorite games, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is my favorite system to run. It's got a lot of flavor. I can do all kinds of fun stuff in it. What? Oh no! The Fantasy Roleplay is my favorite. I play Fantasy Battles, and I play Undead, and I will rock you with my army. I've still got my painted Undead army up at home in 2 rifle cases. So, the rifles don't go in there. My models go in there. Let's see. My favorite gaming experience, though, was my favorite gaming experience was also the highlight of my parenting career, which also tells you something. Okay, this is a good story. We were out LARPing. Okay, I don't know if you guys know what live-action roleplay is. You go out in the woods, you dress up and you go out with your poppers, and you lay into people, and that's what you do. And we were playing at a camp and kind of out in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. It was a Boy Scout camp. It was way far out away from any city light or anything. So, when it got dark, it got really dark. The camp was all on this peninsula that stuck out into the middle of this huge lake. The peninsula was covered in 150-year-old pine forest, so like just these huge columns of trees that went up to about a 45-foot canopy overhead. So basically, it was whenever the moon was out, the moon was on the water all around you, and just kind of cast these long, evil reflections down through these huge columns of trees, in which nested a flock of like 30 turkey vultures. So every once in a while, you'd scare the turkey vultures, and they'd all spook and start flying at the same time. It was just completely eerie out there. You're going through all these paths in the trees. We're out there fighting aliens. Only they couldn't call them aliens, that's copyrighted, so they did what Marvel did and called them the Brood. But the costumes were completely goofy, because if you saw them in the daytime, they didn't look like anything. So it was just foam, spiky bits that stuck out all over the place. But at night, all you could see was an outline. And so you would just sort of see the outline, just kind of in the blackness, this black outline of things with foam spiky bits. And they had little chemical glow lights taped to their eyes and little evil red slits like this. So you would see, the spiky bits, but before that you saw the evil red eyes sort of slowly coming towards you. And instead of making noise, they didn't actually make any noises or anything like that. Everybody, each of the NPCs playing the bad guys had a clicker. And they'd start clicking, so you'd hear clicking and then the evil red eyes and then these spiky bits. And when they got to you, they didn't fight you and kill you, they would hit you just enough to paralyze you, and then you'd be dragged off into the dark and never be seen again. And that was how these bad guys operated. So it was completely scary. And in response to this, the local group had developed a phalanx system of combat. So it would be a wall of shields on the outside and big guys with spears in the middle, and the spellcasters all in the middle throwing beanbags at people, and saying lightning bolt, fireball, and so on. And that was how you did it. And you advanced in this slow step-by-step formation, and that was how you got everybody out alive again. Well, we came from a chapter where the threats were very different, and so our fighting style was much more of a Native American hit-and-run, attack people in the dead of night and get away after you've ruined their evening style. So we did a lot more fighting with weapons in each hand, and me and the kid are out playing our fighters. And we both got like the long black coats. We both got the identical black war paint on. We're both armed the same way. We're playing the warrior and the warrior's apprentice. And so we're on this mission where we're fighting all these things, and we don't have a lot to do because we're pretty much just stuck in the middle. We don't have long weapons and we don't have shields, so we're pretty much just walking along. And then the DMs come up to us and they tell us, all right, at this point from the trail, from here onward, it's only wide enough for 2 people to go side by side. So you can only go 2 by 2 down this trail. And everybody's like, oh, 2 by 2, whoever's in front's gonna die. Oh my God. What happened? And I look over at my son, who's about 16 at this point. He's a couple inches taller than I am, still growing. And I look at him like, you up for this? And he goes, yeah. Because he's such a badass. And I'm like, okay. And we go, all right, we'll go up front. And everybody's like, ooh, yeah, the new guy, send them up front. Let them do this. And so the game master says, all right, 3, 2, 1, game on. And me and the kid take off at a sprint down the trail. We get to the first guy before he's quite done standing up. And we maul him, because we're both fighting with 2 swords. So, like that, jump over his corpse and sprint towards the next guy. And meanwhile, the rest of the group is like, wait, what's going on? And they're trying to come after us. So we get to the next guy, we engage him to tear him apart. Go past him, go to the next one. This guy's ready for us, but it doesn't matter. We tear him to shreds. We're on guy 5 or 6 before I realized, wait a minute, the reason this is happening is because I taught the kid how to fight. So he fights in exactly the same rhythm that I do, because that's what he learned from me. Only we were fighting on alternating beats. So as soon as I started sweeping down for a low line attack, he would pop up to a high line attack and vice versa. And we would trade off at exactly the right time without having to talk to each other about it, because that was just the rhythm we were fighting in. If we planned it, it never would have worked. But we didn't, and it was awesome. So we did like this section of dungeon that was supposed to take us 3 hours, and we did it in 17 minutes. And got to the end. We killed the last guy and went back to back, looking around us like this, and we both put the swords away samurai style at the same time. And everybody behind us goes, "Oh, that was cool." And I'm like, "Be cool, be cool. Let's do this every day." Right? So that's my favorite gaming experience and my best parenting moment. When my son came to me and asked me to teach him to write, he's like, "Well, I guess you were kind of right about teaching me how to boffer fight." Because before we first started boffer fighting, before we first started going out to LARP, I taught him his basic fencing. And then when we got him there, like, well, he's a little younger than most people who are here. We just want to put him up against a weapon marshal and make sure he'll be all right. And I said, yeah, okay, sure. So the kid went up against a weapon marshal. He was 14, against this guy who was 25. The kid beat him 10 touches to 1. And he comes running over to me, bouncing like this. He goes, oh, I can do this. I can sword fight, and I can beat people. And I'm like, yeah, kid, I told you I knew that this is one of the things I could do well. He's like, yeah, but I figured you didn't know what you were talking about. So it's like, it's credibility with the child. Credibility with your offspring. That's solid gold, right? Anyway, long answer to the question. But also,
we're seeing a lot of different things come about in the Dresden and stuff. Elves, fairies, vampires, werewolves. Is there any sort of supernatural thing you wanted to put in that haven't yet, or just can't?
Supernatural things I want to put in that haven't yet, or just can't. No. I feel totally willing, as long as I feel I'm conversant enough with the mythology that I'm dealing with. I'll put anything in. I haven't got to do any Rakshasas yet. I haven't got to do any Jinn really. I haven't got to do nearly enough gods or nearly enough Lovecraftian stuff. I've got to have some more of that. But no, everything's fair game. At least as far as the story goes, as far as running into freaky monsters goes. So if I haven't used it yet, I'm planning on using it, because we still got to do the thing with the dragon, and that's going to be awesome.
Is there any way that Joss Whedon would turn the person on the TV series?
Is there any way that Joss Whedon would do that? I'm sure he doesn't have anything better to do. I can't think what else he'd be doing. What I would prefer to see, if it was going to be on TV again, I would prefer to see it produced as a feature production series like Game of Thrones or one of the other on cable. There is the potential for something like that to happen, but it's Hollywood, so I'm not getting real excited about it yet. One of the rules of Hollywood is nothing's final until the check is cleared, and that's kind of the ground you're standing on out there. And so I'm not getting excited about it now. I did spend most of January writing up a series Bible for a studio, and we'll see if they do anything with it. Yeah.
Are you still going to write more comics?
Am I still going to write more comics? Yes, I just got done writing writing outline for Warcry, which is the new one. That's the one where Dresden and takes a group. It's set right after the events of Deadmeat. And Dresden, who is newly inducted into the Wardens, has to take a group of baby Wardens into a fight. And so it's Ramirez and Wild Bill Myers and Yoshima, and off they go to. They're sent off to the middle of nowhere, Iowa, to find some people and get it out again. And it's terribly complicated by all the things that happen because it's Harry Dresden's life. And, nothing simple with Harry Dresden. But it's great because I get to have him driving out there in the Blue Beetle and have it break down on the outskirts of town. Dresden is just like, it's like, yes, that's where we start. And the artist is just amazing. Actually, the artist starts off with the fight of the White Council versus the Red Court in Sicily and in Africa, and it's horrible. I mean, I'm looking at these scenes of of virtual genocide going on in these cities and going, oh my God, all those corpses, all that horror, it's perfect. But that's one of the risks you run as a writer is finding yourself saying things like that. To do my job, I need a little more C4. Oh yeah, exactly. But yeah.
Favorite authors?
My favorite authors, hands down, is going to be between a couple. Robert B. Parker, who died too soon because I wanted more of his books, and here he stopped being alive. That was a bad career move, Robert. Lois Bujold, Lois McMaster Bujold, I think is a wonderful writer. I think she's one of the best craftsmen working in science fiction today. And Brandon Sanderson. Sanderson is probably the most talented writer in terms of balancing the craft of storytelling and the art of words. I think he's better than anybody else who's working right now. So check out Sanderson, check out Way of Kings. It's the first book in his big epic fantasy series, and it's good. Yeah. The scene, the scene I'm talking about that I'm so impressed with is Kaladin's decision with the bridge at the end, where he's deciding to go whether or not he's going to leave Dalinar to die, and kind of it brings together all these scenes that you thought were nothing, or weren't connected to anything, but there are these incredible moments of character belief and character and emotion that is drawn from all these earlier things that make this person who he is, that make his decision kind of inevitable, and it's awesome. And not only that, but Sanderson has the great habit of going completely over the top. He's the kind of guy who would be happy to write a scene where you're walking your giant robot down the streets of Hong Kong, dragging an oil tanker who uses a baseball bat to fight a giant monster. That's the plot of Pacific Rim, but that's the kind of venue in which Sanderson starts thinking. Once he gets out of kind of this really intimate character focus that he does on the characters, it's time for epic action, and then it goes all animated. It's awesome. But, so those are probably some of my top three. I can mention Patrick Rothfuss there. He's my best enemy. We're Beths. He's awfully. I hate him for his talent. Sanderson, I think, writes too quickly. I think the rest of us need to break his fingers, or he's going to give us a bad name. I read a lot of Scalzi. I like Scalzi's writing a lot. I don't always agree with the guy, but that's okay. He writes a badass book, and I respect the hell out of that. But anyway.
Matthew Stover?
What's that?
Matthew Stover?
I have not read him. Who is this person?
Related to Charles, there's a hero named Kane who's pretty upset most of the time at breaks things.
Oh, okay. Oh, sounds good to me. Let's see, I reread The Belgariad every so often by David Eddings, because that was great epic fantasy. I like to pretend that those were the only 5 books he ever wrote. I reread The Black Company by Glenn Cook probably once a year, because I love those books. If you haven't read The Black Company by Glenn Cook, they're grim, dark, very, very Martian in terms of Martian images. Very, very Martian books. There's a lot of things that go unsaid. You have to read in between there's a lot of subtext in those books that I really enjoy. There you go. There's a bunch. Naomi Novik, the Temeraire series. I grab those as soon as they come out. Yeah.
Quick question for you about being a writer. seems to be about hard work, about listening to voices in your head, then comparing this sort of thing. What other skills do you think grade 1 has?
A good writer borrows from other sources, and the great one just steals outright. That's a Mark Twain quote. But the important thing about being a writer is that you've got to, when you run across things that stir emotions in you, you've got to be the sort of person who can stop and go, oh, that scene was beautiful, it made me cry, in this movie. And then you've got to be the sort of person who stops and goes, wait a minute, why did it make me cry, and how can I use it to make other people cry? My teacher told me, Debbie told me a long time ago, this is one of the things I disagreed with, she says, the art of writing is basically the art of manipulating people's emotions. And she says, that sounds very callous and cold and mercenary, but it's completely true. If you can make people love who you want them to love and hate who you want them to hate, you'll be a successful storyteller. So you've got to, really as a writer, one of the things you've got to do is you've got to learn about people and how they work. So that, I mean, not just because it lets you manipulate your readers, but because it shows you better how to do characters. And you probably gain some character of your own along the line somewhere. I'm still hoping to pick some up. But yeah.
On that note, is there anybody in the Dresden Files that you're not going to destroy either physically or emotionally? Because you seem to be on a bit of a trend here.
I make no promises, man. I think, okay, there's scenes like where people get shot abruptly out of nowhere, or abruptly stabbed with giant, pieces of metal through the chest out of nowhere. Okay, the problem with those scenes is not that they killed favorite characters that we love, but that they didn't make those people suffer anywhere near enough to get the job done as a writer. I look at those and go, you know what? That could have been a lot worse, and this is how we could have made it even worse, and that would have made it that much more painful and terrible, a death for these characters. And yeah, a little bit of sadism. You've got to have a little bit of sadism in your nature to be a good writer. So I make no promises about anybody in the Dresden Files, as far as who's going to make it out alive or with their sanity or in one piece.
I think that's sort of why I based my question. A lot of people make it out alive, but what they end up as is something we may not like.
Well, monster's got to come from somewhere.
Speaking of emotions, will Harry ever get a girlfriend who'll last more than 2 years?
I make no promises. Actually, Harry's romantic life was one of the major things that I didn't plot out ahead of time when I was putting the books together. There are so many other aspects of the story that have been plotted out since I was 25, and that it seems to be working so far. So I've just been sticking to the outline that I wrote back then. But his love life was something that I wanted to be sort of organic and to kind of grow up on its own throughout the series. It turns out that who you love has some minor effects on the rest of your life. So I've been busy dealing with that, as we go along.
Harry's attitudes towards women and how he interacted with women, do they primarily come from Harry, or is there a lot of influence from you?
Oh, as far as interacting with women, I'm probably just at least as clueless as Dresden is. Which is to say, at least as clueless as the Y chromosome half of the species. And I know people who are like much better at the whole interacting with girls thing, and those guys, I hate them a little bit, and so that's why they're all Thomas. But yeah, I mean, I'm fairly clueless myself, and so it's tough to write a character who's smarter than you are. Really, the only way you can write a character who's smarter than you are is to not have them say very much. But anyway, yeah.
I was rewatching Babylon 5 recently. How much of Garibaldi is in Dresden?
How much of Garibaldi's in Dresden? Not a whole ton.
Not a whole ton?
Although, yeah, I could definitely see it was probably an influence without me thinking about it. I think that if I was going to cast anybody for Ebenezer, it'd be Peter Jurassic. who played Londo in Babylon 5. And I would have had, and then I would have had the guy who played Jakar play the gatekeeper. And then they could have been bitchy at one another. It would have been a lot of fun. But what else?
How do you work with the highs and lows of your motivation on a day-to-day basis?
With the highs and lows of my motivation, in what sense?
Just keep on going and keeping it fresh.
Oh, I go out and I meet people and talk to them, and they laugh at my jokes, which is, I always feel very kind. And it makes me feel like an actual writer when I go out on like a tour and stuff like that, and they'll be like, I'm famous now, I should go back home and be famous writer guy. Right after this round of solitaire. But as far as motivation goes, I don't really have to motivate myself much. I mean, I like what I do. And I like to keep eating. I don't have a muse, I have a mortgage. You know, so there's a certain amount of practicality that you really need to be a writer. Although if I was half as mercenary as I like to pretend I was, I'd be writing like just kind of vanilla action thrillers or something like that, or better yet, romance. Romance is where the money is. That's the money when it comes to genre fiction.
I really liked the scenes where you were in Chicago, where you have like the battle of the Dedarians in the Aquarium. Do you actually go to the actual places and talk them out?
I do.
And walk around and
I do, and if you ask the people at the aquarium, what would happen if this wall broke? I mean, if somebody shot it out or something. No, I need to know for professional reasons. They do not have a sense of humor about that at all. Not even a little. I actually had a guy who was a Chicago SWAT team leader come up to me after a signing I did in Chicago a few years ago and say, okay, I read this book. Or I read this short story that you did where you set up this guy, where you had this guy set up as a sniper on the roof, and you pointed out specifically which street lights were put out and everything for this approach. And I need to know who you consulted about that, because people with this kind of tactical knowledge, we sort of like to keep, kind of like to keep it on. And I said, I just figured it out from using Google Earth. The guy goes, you just figured it out. I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh God, I hate the internet. Which was kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, some of the places I go to, some of the places, especially early in my career, I didn't have enough money to go to Chicago and look at things. But I did have a bunch of people on a mailing list. And so I would send out questions to people on the mailing list and say, hey, I need to know what the east wall of Graceland Cemetery looks like. And I'd get back an email. I drive by there on my way to work in the morning. I'll take some pictures on my phone and send them to you. And that was great. That started being able to happen.
So some of it's improvisation, some of it's extrovation.
Yep. Yeah, and I get things wrong sometimes, and I hear all about it. But yeah.
It's a bit like the motivational question. Being a writer, do you ever suffer with writer's block?
No,
like
I don't believe in writer's block. I don't believe it exists. Sometimes I would just really, really rather be playing video games. Yeah. Anytime you're running into a problem like that with writer's block, the problem that you're having is somewhere in the fundamentals of what you've set up in front of you right now. You have either set up your scene incorrectly, or you haven't made things hard enough on your protagonist earlier on. So, you know, when you run into trouble, you're not sure what to do. A lot of times, you just have someone kick down the door and start shooting, and that's what I do a lot. That's advice from old pulp writers, and it totally works. There are a lot of times where the scene will be going along and something's happening, then something else completely unrelated, totally sudden and violent. Okay, that's Jim, not sure what to happen next. You know, what to do next, and so we're gonna have something totally unexpected and violent, and we'll see what falls out. Then I've got to figure out why it's there, and that kind of helps kick me along. Yeah.
Why Chicago, if that's not a town?
Because my writing teacher would not let me set it in Kansas City. She said, originally they were set in Kansas City, my hometown, and because I knew it. And she said, Jim, you're already walking close enough to Laurel Hamilton's toes that you don't need to set this in Missouri, too. She said, pick another city. And I said, what other city? She says, any other city. There's a globe on her desk. There's 4 American cities marked on the globe. So I'm looking at it, and I don't want to use New York because, you know, Superman's got that all sewn up. I don't want to use DC because if you're going to set something in DC, you've got to write politics, and that loses you half your audience, or you go right away, no matter what you do. If I said I don't want to set it in LA because then I'd have to learn about LA. That didn't seem reasonable, so that left only Chicago. I said, how about Chicago? She says, fine, Chicago, wherever, just not Kansas City, and that's why it's in Chicago. Like I said, I've stumbled into this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, just coming back to your approach before, that when you hit sort of a block, you can throw in some action or something unexpected. How much plotting do you do with your writing, and how much, because I was reading Stephen King's comment where he says he just sticks a character in a situation and lets things unfold based on the characters. So how much of that do you do, and how much do you sort of try and structure and plot your books?
Did Stephen King really say that?
It did seem unbelievable.
That's the difference in people who are born with storytelling talent, the predisposition toward doing the right thing in storytelling, and so they do well, like Stephen King. And somebody like me, who had no clue whatsoever and had to be handed some tools to say, aha, here's how you shape the story. For me, I always know where I'm going to begin. I always know where I'm going to end. I always know a great big exploding bit in the middle that has a high special effects budget that is going to sort of propel the story on from the middle of the story to the end of the story. I generally know which characters I'm going to be using. Sometimes, I mean, when I put the story together, I'll always know the characters I'm going to be using when I get started. Occasionally, I have a lot of flexibility in which characters I'm going to choose to use, and so I will sometimes put up a poll on my website and say, hey, who do you want to see more of in the next book? And Murphy. Okay, Murphy will be his sidekick. Fine, do it like that. That'll work out well. But I always know at least that much, and the way I do it is I draw, because again, I'm not all that bright. And when so when people started asking me how I outline my story arcs or story arches, I don't know, one of the two, and I draw an arch. And then I start writing the points of the story. Here's where it begins, here's where it ends, and then I start filling in bits along the way, and just sort of literally. The more I outline, the better off I am, especially writing under a deadline, because when you're writing under a deadline, you've got to get those pages produced. Yeah, that's just part of professionalism. Yeah, I tend to outline, and the more I outline, the smarter I am. I'm not always smart. Yeah, I mean, all my advice on writing, if you go to LiveJournal or jimbutcher.livejournal.com, it's nothing but articles for aspiring writers. So, and that's all it is just articles that are written for folks who are trying to get a handle on story.
I'm just curious, how fast do you write?
When I'm writing well, like when I'm completely in the zone in writing, 2,500 words an hour. When I'm just sort of grinding out words and I'm not at all in the mood, but I've got to write because it's my job and I need to be professional, about 500 words an hour. So I do everything I can to do as much zone writing as possible, because that's when my best stuff gets produced.
So on average, how long would it roughly take you to do a book?
How long would what?
Would it take you to write a book?
To write a book between 4 and 9 months. And a lot of that, it just depends on all kinds of things, has the new Battlefield come out yet? That sort of thing. But, so it averages out to about 6 months a month. Yeah?
Will we get to learn any more about the J Court, possibly?
Probably not, at least not till a big trilogy yet, because they're isolationists, and they're serious about it.
There's a power vacuum.
They really don't want to have anything to do with a Guaylo named Dresden. So, yeah. Yeah, we'll get to see more of that this book. I was actually very proud the scene where Harry actually confronts Maggie seriously for the first time. Marsters was recording it, and it took him like an extra 2 hours to record it, and he kept breaking out in tears. I'm like, yes, I made James Marsters cry. Made me happy all day long. Yeah.
One of your more weirdest scenes was the journey on the way to Chichen Itza, whatever, and like just that journey through the different like parallel universes and stuff like that that's mixed in with the physical ones. Where did you get the ideas? I think there was like the upside down triangles of light and Like, do you just like random things, or how do you?
Yeah, I mean, every time I would like to claim I have this amazing, awesome imagination, and I just pulled them out of there. But every time I think I've done that, I realize that really it's just something I took from a Saturday morning cartoon that I just didn't remember until I saw it on reruns. You know, Bob the Skull, I thought he was so awesome. That was such a great idea to have it. And then I would go and saw the rerun of the opening segment of the original Scooby-Doo cartoon. And that's the first thing you see, is the skull with the flaming eyes giggling, you know, and it's like, oh, what, so original, wow. So there are probably bits and pieces taken from everywhere, and I just don't, the only question is whether I realize it or not. As far as going through the parallel universes, though, to get somewhere else, that's largely lifted from Zelazny's Amber books. I don't know if you guys read Amber, but Traveling Through Shadow is much the same. So, yeah.
With hindsight now, what are your thoughts on the TV series that was made?
My thoughts on the TV series. Could have been worse. You didn't see the first draft, and I did. It could have been a lot worse. Although you also didn't see the original pilot, and I did. It's available. The original pilot is available on the internet for download somewhere, and it's actually it's the 2-hour version of the Stormfront episode, and it just covers the events of Stormfront. It's not bad. I don't know if you guys know this or not. I'm going to share with you my conspiracy theory on what killed the Dresden Files on television. I don't have any proof, but I have a bulletin board with pictures and note cards and bits of yarn strung out, which is almost as good as proof, because it's a conspiracy theory. Proof actually burdens the conspiracy theory. It makes it not work. But bear in mind that at the time the Dresden Files came out, there were a couple of powerful executives working at the Sci-Fi Channel. The first was Bonnie Hammer, who had given the Sci-Fi Channel professional wrestling and Ghost Hunters, which were successful because they didn't cost very much and they generated revenue. And then there was, what was his name? I believe it was David Howe, who had just been responsible for bringing Battlestar Galactica to the Sci-Fi Channel to worldwide critical acclaim and success. And David Howe was the one who was behind the Dresden Files. So, 2 weeks before the Dresden Files started airing, Bonnie Hammer took over. And all of a sudden, lots of things started happening to the Dresden Files. 2 weeks before filming was about to start. They replaced the producer, Robert Wolf. They told him, okay, you're going to be second in command, you're going to be our on-the-spot commander, but the guy who's actually in charge is going to be so-and-so, who we just got from, we just got done doing Charmed, and he's going to be the boss from LA while you shoot in Toronto. And the first thing the new boss said was, skip all this serial nonsense, because actually the first season was originally supposed to cover the events of Stormfront and Full Moon. And they said, skip all that serial nonsense, we're just going to do individual episodes that aren't connected. And they're like, we've only got 2 weeks until we start shooting, and there's no time to rewrite for that. And, oh, never mind, just disconnect the stories and change everybody's names and switch the order around. And
much of the novels at all. It just, I would take stay beside.
Did you notice that too? I thought it was just so really, the folks that were there did the best they could with what they had, but they were constantly being sandbagged by folks in LA. You know, they would, for instance, they would write in scene changes. This guy would write in scene changes that would change who was going to be in a scene that they were going to shoot the next day. He would send it out by 9 o'clock California time, which is considered acceptable in California, except that that's midnight in Toronto. And by the time the changes got out and people got alerted to it, it was 1 o'clock in the morning in Toronto before the bosses started giving orders to change the scene that is going to start shooting at 5 a.m. And so they wind up calling up, Terrence Mann and saying, hey Terry, sorry, we know you were supposed to go see your wife and kids tomorrow for the first time in 5 weeks, but we need you on stage at 5 a.m. instead. And so that led to many days of frustration and so on like that on the set, because there was such a disconnect between the guy who was in charge and people who actually had to make it happen. So there were many days on the set where people were grumpy and ugly and the things were not going well. You know, and I saw it once when I was there. Heck, when I was there, I saw him change Harry Dresden killing Justin from Harry killing Justin to Harry accidentally killing Justin. You know, from making a choice to kill him, he drops the gun and it goes off, and the bullet kills him. I think it was a voodoo doll, but not a gun. But it amounts to the same thing. It was supposed to be an accident, and you know, I remember standing there reading it with Robert Wolfe on one side and the director on the other, and Paul Blackthorne right here, and we're sort of reading the script. And Paul's the first one to speak. He's a little bit blunt, and says, "I cannot believe this bullshit." To which I could not help but agree. But I didn't say anything, and David's like, well, and Robert's like, well, yeah, I don't like it either, but if this is the rewrite, he's the guy who's actually in charge of this. And the director's like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. This is terrible. This is awful. You know, writing this huge major character moment into an accident instead of a choice. And they're like, Jim, what do you think? And it's like, I kind of looked at the page and looked up at them and said, guys, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't read my copy. It's all blurry. Maybe there was a bad fax machine. And they're like, yeah, maybe it was a bad fax machine. Like I said, I don't work well in that kind of structured situation.
I really like the choice of Paul Blackthorne for Harry. Do you do what I do and watch Arrow and expect him to break out magic?
I haven't watched Arrow, so no.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
That's one of the shows I'm still getting caught up on. It's next in line after I finish this season of Justified, which is just one of the best written shows I've seen. Yeah. yeah. Is Whalen awesome or what? But anyway, and Crowder's the best villain ever. Boy, Crowder, he can play Nicodemus just because he's done so well with Lord of the Rings. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I don't think that way. I think he did a good job. He didn't look anything like Harry in my head, but he acted Harry well. Interestingly, you know, the two finalists for that were Paul and Baldwin. Jane Firefly was the other finalist to be here. I would have, and that would have been kind of cool. I would have loved to see what he would have done. Because he can be humiliated well. He doesn't. Yeah.
I couldn't understand that authors don't generally get a lot of say in this, but it's been 16 or so books. Why do they still have the hat? Have you not had a chance to get rid of the hat from the front covers?
Authors don't have a whole lot to say. Although you will hear me making jokes about it more and more as the series goes on.
A few of those.
Who knows? Maybe by the end of it, I'll have Dresden get Indy's hat from the Smithsonian or something like that, because it will have so much power in it to preserve him as an adventurer and lovable rogue. Yeah. Yes.
Right. You've done the Dresden Files RPG tabletop game. Would you consider doing that for Alera as well, the Alera world? And do some
It's okay with me if somebody wants to do it. Actually, I think Evil Hat is looking at it.
Awesome.
Although I think they might be more interested in focusing on Cinder Spires.
Fred needs to get more of his hands, and that'll just lose him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because Fred, you know, he doesn't have a lot to do. In Evil Hat, he doesn't have any other projects going on.
Kickstarters, no new games. No.
You know, whatever. The interesting thing about the game is I'm the one person in the world who can't play the Dresden Files DFRPG. Imagine trying to GM me, because I'm a power gaming weasel. Yes, it is that way. If necessary, I'll write it that way. How could you do it? But if I'm the GM,
yeah,
too much like work. You know, I can't really enjoy it. So yeah, I'm like the one person in the world who can't enjoy it. But you guys should have a good time. You definitely should.
We do.
Yeah. Well done. Yeah, I realized my son had gotten to be 21 years old and yet had never actually played Dungeons and Dragons. Oh. And I was like, oh my God, I failed as a parent. What have you done? Well, I must fix this. And so I put together a D&D game for my son and his cousins, and it's actually turning into a couples games now as everybody is getting girlfriends and so on. Because if the girl is not nerdy enough to play some D&D, she doesn't deserve my son. But so I started running them. But D&D isn't D&D anymore because it's D&D 4th edition and it's terrible.
I agree.
Which I was actually one of the playtesters for 4th edition, which they already had everything published before they sent things to the playtesters. So why did they bother to playtest? And I wrote them a 2-word summary of D&D 4th edition, which they did not like at all. my 2-word summary of D&D 4th edition was new Coke.
That was how Tracy Hickman described it at Gen Con as well. Exactly the same way.
Yes, exactly. And it crashed and burned. And for D&D Next, they're trying to fix it.
Have you playtested that?
I have a bit, and they're trying to fix it.
It's not bad.
Which I admire. But really, D&D got carried forward with Pathfinder and the folks at Paizo, who saw what was going on with 4th edition and said, we could make so much money doing it this way. They've done pretty well. Go capitalism. I like that part. Because I can still play D&D. So I started running Pathfinder for them, but I started running them through the old Caves of Chaos campaign. Because when you play Dungeons and Dragons, you play Caves of Chaos. That's where it starts. That's how it is.
Rats.
And evermore shall be. So I started doing that, only I set the game in a zombie apocalypse, with the Keep on the Borderlands being the last holdout of humanity. And in order to get in, they had to volunteer to be on the Expeditionary Force. And the first thing the Expeditionary Force had to do was go to the Caves of Chaos and try and enlist the Greenskins in an alliance against the zombies. So Caves of Chaos turned out to be this diplomatic dungeon. And it's a totally different dungeon as diplomacy. It's awesome. And a good time was had by all. And you know, we run zombie rules. So if you're not looking at the zombie, if there's zombies 50 yards that way, but everybody turns away to look over here and you turn back, here they are, right there. That's the way it works in a zombie world. But you gotta be able to roll with that.
Did you have much input into the choice of the fate system for the Dresden RPG, and how do you feel about that as a system?
The fate system for the RPG, I think, is pretty brilliant, and folks seem to be having a pretty good time with it. I didn't have a whole lot of input on the game, other than they would ask me questions for hours and hours and hours, and I would answer them. I did feel pretty good about the fact that that the guys who were putting the game together got so deep into the world lore that they went, wait a minute, if A and B are true, then this C thing over here must also be true. Is this going to happen in the books? And I'd be like, shut up, don't worry about that. That's saving that for a surprise. Okay, we'll be quiet. But as far as the game went, I didn't really have a whole lot to do with it. I thought I was going to, when I got sent basically final proofs for approval, I thought I was going to be tearing into them and just ripping them to shreds and leaving them just covered in bloody red ink, and instead I was laughing. They had done such a good job that they didn't leave me any room to go in. So it's like, no, I guess you've done your thing. This is kind of awesome, actually. I wish I could play it. You know, but anyway. Yes?
Do your publishers kind of give you just total freedom with all of your Dresden books? Or did it start where they kind of went, that might be going a bit far? I'm thinking more Sue.
No, they've never, no, my publishers have never really, ever since summer 9, really, they basically just said, you know, we're just going to let this guy do what he does because it seems to be working. So these days, no, I don't get it. I get things from my publishers that, you know, questions of logic, like can we connect these two logical points that don't seem to match up? Or you know, you forgot this detail from chapter 7 that needs to be carried through into chapter 11. You know, stuff like that. But they never go, Jim, this is too much, you can't possibly do this. Maybe I just haven't gone far enough. Maybe I need to be more, you're right, I need to be more horrible than friends. But no, I mean, so far, nothing like that. Okay, 2 more questions.
What happened to Lady Beckett, Monkman's girl?
Oh, what happened to Coma Girl in the hospital? We will find out. Not skin game, but we will find out. And one more. Listen, some of you guys are going. Yeah.
Are there some characters as you've written them that have turned out differently? So if you've had a plot, are there some characters you thought would be incidental that as you've written it have become?
Yeah, absolutely. The characters do that kind of stuff all the time. Butters was supposed to be a throw-off one character, one use character that we were going to see in one book, and people liked him so much that when I put up a poll, you know, to say who was going to, who should you want to see more of, and I got Butters. So when Harry went into the book where he was going to be up against a bunch of necromancers and he needed a sidekick, and it's like, well, why not have the corpse examiner be the sidekick? You know, because that really seems. Yeah, appropriate yet completely useless against everyone. To make Harry's day that much worse, and so that made it even better. But yeah, Butter's getting some more you'll enjoy that. Okay, guys, thank you very, very much for being so kind to me this evening.
Upstairs, so I'll have to go and get it after.
Okay.
Then we'll do the book signing here. There's books for sale outside for $20 a copy, I believe. You can check with the bookshop staff. I've also got, I did mention some of you, I've got posters upstairs. If you've already purchased all of these books, e-books, and you just want something to sign, so I'll bring them down, and that's first in, first served.
Yeah, I haven't seen these posters, so. And so we'll sign up some books and chat a bit more, and thanks a lot, guys.